All right, good morning, Facebook friends. Excited to be here. This coming week, we're less than a week from Thanksgiving, and so it's time to start getting ready for the holidays. I hope you're playing your holiday music. Most people are not, but I'm a holiday music junkie. I love the holiday music and listening to the old traditional, so I'm excited about being part of it. Today, you see my guest here, Mr. Dean Tapey with Pacific West Credit. And what we're going to talk about is credit repair and how it affects you, what it costs you, how it affects you, and how to address some of the challenges. But before we get into Dean, I'm going to share with you a few different things. The book that I've written, Why the Rich Stay Rich and the Poor Stay Poor. One of the key objectives and why I titled it that is our belief system. So every week I like to start out with a couple inspirational quotes, and I want to share with you one. You have to dream before your dreams can come true. This is from Abdul Kalam, president of the country of India. And here's another one by Benjamin Franklin. Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship. And I thought that was really appropriate for what we're talking about today with credit and credit repair and the cost of credit. Most people are oblivious to what their credit is costing them, and I guarantee you it's costing you every single day in many ways, and as I said, we're going to get back to that. Now, there was an article in Los Angeles Times this week that I thought was really profound and just germane to everything and what our whole purpose is here, which is addressing the great divide in our country between the rich, the middle class, and the poor. And as you heard me say in the previous episode, our first show, we talked about this gap. I've done a ton of research. In the 1940s, 80% of the wealth was distributed over 90% of the people. Now, I want to restate that. I want to make sure you understand. 80% of the wealth was distributed over 90% of the people. So that seems like a pretty reasonable distribution, in that most people were basically benefiting from the overall country wealth growth. But since the 40s, that gap has been widening ever more, and it's changed. But our world has changed, and the velocity of this change over the past 30 years has been dramatic. Today, the wealth gap is at an unbelievable level, and the velocity of the growth in the wealth gap is far beyond where most people believe. I'm going to share with you what this article in the LA Times this week shared, so you can appreciate, and I think illustrates really well what a crisis level we are at today. It can be hard to grasp just how much money is concentrated in just a few hands in our lopsided economy today. But here's a start. The richest 3 people, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett, together have more wealth than the entire bottom half of the country combined. To put an even finer point on it, that's 3 people versus 160 million people. 1 in 5 households has a zero or negative wealth today, negative net worth today. So that's basically 20% of the people are negative. A full 50% of the people have no money. I mean, they live paycheck to paycheck. That's a scary situation. Half the people. And the problem is getting worse. Today, the poorest member of the Forbes 400 has $2 billion. This represents a 10-fold jump from when the magazine first started its list in 1982. In fact, the combined wealth of $2.68 trillion, the billionaires of the Forbes 400 have more wealth than the entire GDP of the United Kingdom, which is the world's 5th wealthiest country. This marks yet another 10-fold increase from the 1980s. The rest of the country has not shared in the economic gains of the last 3 decades. Now listen to this. These are unbelievable numbers. In 1983, the first year the Federal Reserve started collecting consistent data, The median family had $83,000, and this is inflation adjusted in today's terms. That number has fallen to $80,000. So since 1983, was that 34 years ago? In other words, while today's 400 richest Americans are 10 times richer than in 1983, the average family is worse off than they were 34 years ago. This is what this show is all about. This is really what my life journey is all about. This is an ugly situation, as you can see. And so many people, we have this massive political divide. And if you don't recall, I'll tell you, this show has nothing to do with politics. This issue, the government can't fix this. Until we stop looking for the government and someone else to fix this, the problem's never going to get better. If the government could fix this, it would have been changed at some level. See, all this stuff from the politicians is a bunch of just BS. We've been going in a different direction. This divide dates back to the 1940s. That's 75 years ago. How many administrations have we gone through? How many times have we gone Democrat, Republican, and all of these guys saying, yeah, they have a better way, a better path, and the divide gets wider and wider, and the middle class and the poor farther and farther apart. It's all salesmanship and lip service. If any of them could really make a difference, something would have happened. The reason is we are in a global economy. The dynamics of the world are radically different. But here's the good news. The good news is we don't need them. Here's why the wealth gap continues to grow exponentially. If you missed last week's episode, you need to see that. What I explain in great detail is the difference between linear wealth growth and exponential wealth growth. Now, I'm not going to get into that today, but that's the difference and that's the solution. 90% of the people in this country are trying to save their way, and they are pursuing the path of linear wealth growth. Linear means basically a straight line. If you didn't see last week's episode, you're not going to understand what that means. So you need to see that, or we can talk and I'll explain it to you in a webinar or what have you, but you need to understand. That's the reason the wealth gap is getting worse and worse and worse, is you have zero chance in a linear wealth growth strategy, which is basically trying to save your way there through the bank, through a 401k, through an IRA, etc. You have to understand the principles of exponential wealth growth. Again, after we're done with Dean here, I'm going to share with you how, if you missed that, and if you want to learn how you can get engaged, because anyone can use the strategies that the super wealthy use to build exponential wealth growth. You don't have to be wealthy. You can start at any level, but you have to understand the difference and then how to apply these principles. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into our conversation with Dean. Now, I've been in the real estate and the mortgage industry since 1977, and the world of credit has changed radically from back in those days when we would run credit reports and it took 2 weeks to even get a credit report. And we'd get the credit report and it was very subjective, meaning that when you looked at your credit report from the different credit bureaus and it was submitted, an underwriter would review that and they had some guidelines. All that's changed since the creation of credit scoring. So why don't we start with the premise of, it's really important you understand who the players are in the credit bureaus and how the credit scores, where they come from, how they work, and then how much money they cost you. So let me start with that, Dean. So, let's explain what a credit score is and kind of where it comes from and what the foundation of what credit scores are.
Well, everybody has 3 credit scores with the 3 major bureaus, and I know there's a couple other ones out there, but you have an Experian score, an Equifax score, and a TransUnion score. And when somebody pulls your credit, you'll see a different number. And why is there a different number when they should all be the same? Because a furnisher that reports to a credit bureau, one of the 3, doesn't always report to all three because it costs the furniture a monthly fee to report. In other words, somebody can report to TransUnion and Equifax, but not Experian. So that could be a positive trade line with a good history, but that company's electing not to because now they're paying 3 fees every month rather than the 2 fees.
All right, well, time out. I want to make sure I understand that, okay? So, if I have an account with, one of I used to always see come up with Daniel's Jewelers.
Okay, Daniel's Jewelers, okay.
Now, so Daniel's Jewelers, wouldn't necessarily then be attached to all 3 credit bureaus?
Right.
Why is that?
Because it's a fee. Because they have to pay a monthly fee to report the payment history. It just doesn't automatically.
So he might just say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to pay for all 3 people, I'll just pay for one, right?
Right, and there's some people that even have mortgage payments that don't get reported because the servicing company, if you have a huge portfolio, the lender will just ask for a VOM and then the payment, the history comes on the VOM. So not all furnitures report to all 3 bureaus. That can go good and bad, especially when it comes to a collection account.
Okay, what's the rate? Like, what's the worst score you could have, and what's the absolute best score?
Well, the 3 bureaus have 3 models, but they say when you get a credit report, they go as low as 350. I've rarely seen that. As high as 850, which I've rarely seen. So you're in the middle.
So 400 to 800 kind of thing.
Let's say 400 to 800 is a good number.
Okay, what percentage of the people would you say are in the 400? The 500, 600, 700 range, would you say? Like, how does it break out?
It breaks down. I didn't bring that sheet, but I would say in every 50 points. So in other words, let's say in the 750 above, about 12% of the population is 750 above. Okay. And that's just a rough number. And then somebody from 500 and below, about 10% of the population is there, and then the rest is, let's say if you broke it down into 40 points, and it's all a percentage. Right. Okay. There is a way to get that.
So, what are the percentages, or what do these numbers mean? Like, when you say 500 of what? Like, when they say the credit score is 500 of what? What are they kind of, there's got to be a correlation to something.
They have a system, let's just say, I just call it a blender, and they take your credit history here, they take your history of credit that you had, the amount of credit, meaning the types of credit you have, and then the limits and the balances. And a rule of thumb is if you have a credit card in your wallet and you have a $10,000 limit, you want to keep your balance at $3,000. Right. That's called your utilization rate. That's going to give you optimum credit score. If you max out that credit card or exceed that limit, it could drop your credit score 40 to 60 points, excuse me.
All right, so let me restate that to make sure we got that. Okay, so if they have a $3,000 limit, all right, because they want to have an open amount, right?
Right.
Okay, because if a lot of times people think they're better off just closing all their accounts, right?
Right, and that hurts their credit because you get wiped out all that credit history.
Oh, it's because so if they close their account, it wipes out the credit history.
Right.
Now, what about the impact of, let's say you have a $3,000 credit limit, and how much of available credit do you want to have on there where it's going to be beneficial to your credit score?
If you have a $3,000 limit, try to keep your balance at $1,000. Okay. Then what I do personally, and what I tell clients is, if you have a good credit card, it's $3,000. You'll never most likely get up into the 700 credit score with only a $3,000 limit. So call up, let's say Wells Fargo for an example, and you're in good standing, and once a year, call them up and ask them for a credit line increase. And then they'll do like an internal credit check, usually just with one bureau, and take your $3,000 limit and increase it maybe to $4,000. And now you have more spending power, but also you have more credit worthiness according to the FICO model.
Right.
So if you have 5 credit cards that are at $3,000, you most likely will never be above 700 credit score. But if you have 3 credit cards at $8,000 to $10,000, you demonstrated more credit worthiness to the banks. Now your score most likely will be above the $700.
We have a question.
Okay,
yeah.
Shoot.
And this may have already been answered. So Lori's asking, what does it mean when a creditor increases your credit limits with notice? Should we allow the increase?
I would say yes to that, because that's
Well, time out, Dean, repeat what's in your head, because I want to make sure everybody heard.
Okay,
what
go
you
ahead,
said.
go
What
ahead.
does it mean when a creditor increases your limits with notice? That's question one.
Okay, cool.
So if they give you a letter, typically, that they're increasing your limit, you demonstrate good credit worthiness to that bank, which is a good sign, and I would take it because it doesn't cost you any money. They've already done their due diligence, and I would take advantage of that offer.
Okay, great. So when someone comes in and says, okay, my credit score is 580, and in the mortgage world, there's different kinds of loans. There's conventional loans, which are Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans. There's government loans like FHA and VA. And I bring that up because the credit tolerances on loans that you get approved, the government loans is much more liberal than the conventional. But in either scenario, even though on a government loan, an FHA or VA loan, you can get approved with a lower credit score, it's still going to cost you money. But when you start getting south of 600, 620, it gets harder and harder. Now, let's say someone has that credit score of 580. When you see that kind of scenario, share your experience as far as within, let's say, a 6-month time period. How much have you been able to get the credit score up? What's the cost? What's that whole process? What are some of the things you look for? What's the strategy that you kind of approach to help that person?
Well, if they have no current lates and haven't been late last month or 2 months ago, and they still have a 580 credit score, most likely on that credit report there will probably be an old collection account, whether it was paid or they co-signed for a family or a friend, and it could be old. That will drop their credit score significantly. It will still stay on their credit report for up to 7 years. Doesn't mean that the collection company is reporting it. It's still just like, let's say, a red mark on the credit. Right. And I would assume if that person has a 580 credit score, the credit card in their wallet is probably a $300 limit. It shows the credit score, the credit limit, and the credit score is a reflection. So first I would say, have you been actively paying this credit card of $300? And I would increase the limit, which would increase the credit score. Then also, if they have a family or friend that has a good credit card and that they trust, and obviously, I would say, like Mark, I have a 580 credit score. I know you have good credit. Can you add me on as an authorized user on your American Express card? Now, what that does is, doesn't mean I get the credit card, even though one will come in sent to Mark and my name on it, and he can keep it. But that authorized user, his credit history will now go to mine. And it's whether we're, because husband and wife, sometimes one doesn't have credit. It's like, here, honey, here's my card, use my card. That will give you an instant boost. That credit history will transfer to my credit report.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. So Robert's asking, on the higher end, if you have multiple cards with, say, a $25,000 limit, where should you keep the balance?
Under 30% of the limit. Okay. So let's say 25,000. Let's just keep it at let's say 20. So for every 10,000, keep it at 3,000. It's 20,000. Keep it at
right.
6,000. So it's 2,500. What, $7,500?
So if they do that, like how does that translate into credits? How much does it help them, or whatever?
It can drop your credit score when you exceed that 30% threshold. It could drop it from 10 to 17 points. And here'll be an example. I had some work done to my truck. I got a $5,000 credit limit, and I got $2,700 worth of work done, approximately. And I'm on Discover card, and I get my credit monitoring. So I was $779. Okay, now since I got that new card on my truck, I'm on my second payment. I'm past the 30% of my utilization rate. I got my Discover card. My credit score went down to 761. So you can see just that one credit card, when everything's the same, I exceeded the 30% threshold, and I lost about 12 or 15 credit points. Now that's a big deal in Mark's world in the lending, because that can affect your rate a lot. And so
do you let me ask you, is that okay? When we look at the categories, like late payments, whether they're, 30, 60 day, 90 day, credit cards, all that kind of revolving debt and even contract debt and that kind of thing. Then there's public records like judgments and collections and bankruptcy. What are the things that you can help them and which categories, can you not help?
Well, the bankruptcies are really difficult to, we just use the Fair Credit Reporting Act challenging the accuracy of the information, but you got to keep in mind when you're filing bankruptcy, you're not just filing bankruptcy, you're trying to discharge debt. So that's the whole purpose of the bankruptcy laws. So you got to keep in mind all the things that you included in your bankruptcy, those creditors have now been discharged through the courts, and a lot of times they're no longer reporting to the bureaus. And when we just send a letter just to verify the accuracy of this information, the furnisher on the other end has probably purged the account. They're not going to collect anything, and this costs them time, energy, and money to verify the information. So if we were able to get some of these removed, it's going to have a positive effect on the credit report.
Okay. Do you have another question?
Yeah, we have another question. So this is a question from Lori again. My husband doesn't have any credit cards. Should I ask for a credit card for him off one of my creditors? He has applied for credit cards and gets denied.
Yeah, have you go ahead and put him on as an authorized user on a couple of your accounts. Let that season 30 to 60 days, and then he can go out and apply either at Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or Capital One, and apply in his own name for a secured credit card.
Okay.
And you can start off with as low as $300. You'll get let's say Capital One, you'll get a credit card for you give them $300, you get a $300 limit. Obviously keep it no balance, no higher than $100. And then yet they'll report that credit history to the three bureaus.
Okay. What's the largest credit score improvement that you've seen in, let's say, a 6-month period?
This will sound crazy, but 600 points. Okay? Okay, but why? Well, let me explain that. Why would somebody go raise their score 600? Because we have a client in our program. When you have nothing but negative trade lines and you have no credit, you'll have no credit score. So when a lender pulls your credit, you'll have an NA. There's no score because everything's negative, there's nothing positive. So we were able to, she had some medical stuff that we were able to do some pay for deletion letters, get those resolved. I had her get 2 secured credit cards. Her dad added her on as an authorized user, and now she's at like 650. So that's a 6. So she went from no credit to a 650 score. There's a few things we still need to work on, but she's ecstatic because now she is, she's got a score. Somebody can recognize her.
What would you say is typical? What's a typical, not extreme, not middle, but just kind of average? Because, as I say, most of our, we get all kinds of people that are in that 580 to 620 neighborhood. And if we can get them, past 640, it makes a big difference in their loan pricing.
It makes a huge difference. If somebody's 580 to 640, that's easy because I can look at the report and say, Mr. Customer, you need to do this on your end, pay down some debt. Maybe let's do a pay for deletion letter on a collection account, and then I can do my work. That from the lower the score, the easier it is to repair. Now, if somebody's at a 720 and needs to get to 740 for the good pricing, that's a little more due diligence. A lot of time that has to do with length of credit, the balances, and believe it or not, one small collection account that a consumer decides to pay off. Let's say it's $60. They wanted it to go away, but that account has been dormant on the credit report. They paid that account, it re-ages the debt, they re-report to the bureaus, and that can drop your score 60 points. So some people think by paying off a collection account it helps.
Okay, 2 more questions so far. Okay, so Robert's asking if you add someone to your good credit card, I think this was going back to that conversation of helping somebody increase their credit, right? How soon will the credit score of the new authorized person be affected? Was that?
Next month, the next billing cycle. Sometimes it's that next week, but I just, to be safe, it'd still be the next billing cycle.
And then what would that mean for that person's ability to buy property? And I would.
Well, if you just get one authorized user, I don't know if that's going to bring them up into the 700 range. So what I recommend, and I tell everybody and anybody listening out there, is to pull your credit report from some source with all 3 bureaus once a year. Because there's a lot of moving parts out there.
Okay, and then another question, which is an add-on to a previous, the husband that didn't have credit that kept getting denied, what's a good credit company to have him apply to? So I guess after.
'Cause I like Capital One, secured credit card with Capital One.
By the way, that reminds me of something. What is your opinion of the freebie companies like Credit Karma and these kinds of things? Is that worth them pulling or not worth them pulling?
There's always, I don't want to get into the disclaimers, but there's always a consequence when something's free. So a good place to get one would be from Mark and his company. I know there's a cost to it. I like creditchecktotal.com. It's owned by Experian. You can
Is that
get
a freebie one?
No, it's $1.
Oh, it's $1.
You pay $1. Here's why you pay $1. Well, they give you a free report. It costs them money, but they don't sell your data. Some free companies that give you a free credit report will sell your data to anybody that wants to purchase it. Sometimes you may not want your data sold. CreditCheckTotal.com will, by paying the $1, they're not selling your data. The caveat is if you don't want their credit monitoring service, you have to call them within 7 days and cancel.
So it's Credit Check Total?
CreditCheckTotal.com. I've used it. Hundreds of my clients have used it. It's a clean, easy report. Now keep in mind it's a soft pull. A soft pull that you get from Credit Check Total versus the one Mark pulls, there's going to be a discrepancy of about 40 points. So just keep that in mind.
Define a soft pull.
A soft pull is it doesn't dig deep into your history. It's not always up to date, like up to the minute, like a hard pull would be, and you can't get the financing from it. A hard pull, Mark can give you a loan off of a hard inquiry. It's up to the date, moment, or minute, versus a soft pull. So it's just kind of like, not.
I get the gist of it, but is this CreditCheckTotal.com? Is that attached to Experian or?
Experian owns it. Yes.
Oh, Experian owns it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then if Experian owns it, that's at least that's a starting point. And for
Yeah.
a buck, you can't beat a buck, right?
You can't beat a buck.
Yeah. Okay.
Another question, guys. What is a pay for deletion letter?
A pay for deletion letter is when you go and you tell a collection company you'll pay them, let's say $120, but you'll only pay them if you delete the trade line from my credit profile.
Okay.
And they agree to it, and they send you a response on a company letterhead. Because if you're going to pay them, whether you owe it or not, it's like, hey, I'm going to pay you some money. I need you to reciprocate and delete the trade line from my credit report, which is having a negative impact on my score.
Okay. What do you think is the biggest consumer misconception when you're talking to customers? Like, where do you think they're most ignorant? What are they? What are the biggest mistakes they make?
I think the biggest consumer is when they get the free credit reports and they think their score's 740, and then they go to the lender and they get mad at their lender because when their lender pulls their credit, they're 680.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest, because you're following the FICO model, which is a Fair Isaac, but the free credit reports don't always follow a FICO model.
Okay.
It's just kind of a soft, like I said, a soft pull.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Anything else over there, Strand?
Nothing yet.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Well, I want to stay on schedule. We're 10:29 here. Couple things now. If you need credit help, you see my information here. Contact me. You can shoot me an email. You can go to the website and send me your information. We'll get together. We have an account with Dean's Company, and we'll get you connected. To start this journey of analyzing your credit. What we can do. If this is something you want to explore, then I would start with Dean's recommendation of that CreditCheckTotal.com for a buck. I think it's going to be more reliable than that Credit Karma. Get that, and then contact me. We'll take a look at where you are credit score-wise, and then we'll start going from there. And then we can talk about the pricing program that Dean has, and with that. I don't know if you want to discuss that now, or you just want to discuss it when we send them over to you.
Well, yeah, it's easy. So for an individual to sign up, it's $229 to set up their portal and send out the letters, regardless if there's 3 or 50 items. And after that, it's just $99 a month. You can cancel at any time. There's no penalty.
What is your experience? Like, what's the average time people stay in the program?
About almost 5 months.
5, 6
Yeah,
months.
because here's a rule of thumb. If you have a 90-day late, That's extremely difficult. Lates are harder to get off than collection accounts. There's no magic letter, and we do have to follow a procedure. But for when you have people calling into you, the consultation's free.
Okay.
And if I can help them, I'll tell them how, and if I can, I'll tell them why.
For one collection account to fall off, what is usually the impact of credit? Like how many points is that?
It could be, depending on how old the debt is, it could be anywhere from 20 to 40 points, one collection.
Oh, wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that's huge when it comes to not only getting approval, but your pricing. If you have credit issues, and here's the thing about life in the world, the real world of money that is really unfortunate, is the people that can afford the expenses the least are the ones that pay the most. You look at the people that are struggling financially, their credit scores have been impacted, and their credit cards are getting slammed with 24, 25%. Interest rates, they get slammed with extra fees on every little thing. If you can get into getting a car, you'll end up with a 15 to 18% car loan. If you can get into a house, your interest rate's 0.5% higher. Your fee, everything's more expensive. And again, it's a shame because it's the people who can afford it, the least. But credit is critical, and understanding that you can. Within, Dean and I had lunch, we were talking about this. The laws of the judicial system and the regulations, and we don't have time to get in all of this, allow for him to make a big impact. It's not just real cut and dry. There's a lot of legal wiggle room in there that he can represent you and help you to improve your credit score quite a bit that you're just not aware of. So, whether you're buying a house or not, you need to get your credit score up because it's costing you money. Do you have another question?
I just want to, somebody's asking about the cost again for the credit repair, and I want to make sure, I'm going to post it, $229 to start.
$229 to start and $99 a month.
Okay. And
then for a couple, you get a break. It's $349 and $199 a month. And one person, since husband and wife have separate credit profiles, one usually graduates sooner. So if Mark is out of the program, then his wife just goes to 99, and we keep that really simple.
So, all right, terrific. Okay, all right, one last thing and then we'll wrap up. As I was talking in the beginning, we talked about the wealth gap between the rich and the middle class and the poor and how it just gets wider and wider and wider. What I want you to know is that we can turn this around and you can get on the path to wealth. But I want to be really clear about when I say that is not just hyperbole, what that truly means to you. And see, can anyone be rich? I mean, theoretically, you could say that, but from a practical perspective, if someone's unemployed, it's not going to happen, right? So here is who can be rich. If you make over $60,000 a year as an individual or a married couple, I can help you. I have a plan. When I say plan, it's a very specific written strategy and formula, taking your life circumstance where you are. I call it how to be rich. It's that simple. We all want to be rich. But here's the part that I know, and you can probably sense a little bit of my frustration, is I know that 60% of the people in this country can be wealthy. But only about 5% truly are. 10% of the people are in a place where they're comfortable. 60% of the people can, so that means, bottom 40, we really can't help because most of them, they either are unemployed or have part-time jobs, or they're very young and they really haven't got their life started yet. But that level between the 90 percentile to the 40, that's half the people in this country. We can get their wealth, and most importantly, their alternative income. And here's why I call it alternative income. Everyone focuses on how much money they're making on their job, but what they don't pay attention to is how much alternative income. The quality of your life and ultimately retirement is about your alternative income. If you don't have any alternative income, if you're just trying to save and wait to a 401k, you're doing it completely wrong. My How to Be Rich plan, what we'll do is we will take a look at where you are in your life right now. When I say where you are, how much you're making, where your credit and your debt is, how much you have saved, and I don't care if it's zero and you don't need to save any money. And I can show you how we can create the alternative income to get you to that place to where you can go from zero net worth, where you can go from that being in that 50 percentile from the 90 to the bottom 40. That's a huge number. But in that level, that gigantic number means those people are going to be able to either never retire, most of them, and some that can retire are going to run out of money inside 2 years. It doesn't have to be that way. We can solve this. I have a very specific path that I've learned over my 40 years that I can teach you, we can get together and help you with, because I want you to have the better life. But you gotta believe, it drives me absolutely crazy that people in their brain are like, oh, it's impossible. I've been all told my whole life, I can save money, I can't save, I can't get there. Because you believe that it's all about saving money, and it's not. You don't have to save money. We can get you there. There is a path. It's the difference between you're going down the path of linear wealth growth, and let me just be candid, you're screwed that way. It's not going to happen. But the path through exponential wealth growth that I've learned over the past 4 years, I can help you. I can give you a detailed, specific path that you can do, and you can be rich. I can't say it any more clearly than that. The only reason you're going to struggle with your life is if you choose not to learn how to be rich and get this plan. I'll give you a 15-minute free consultation. 15 minutes, we get on the phone, we will do it online, you don't need to come in, you can do it from bed, just get your computer and your cell phone, we'll do a 15-minute consultation, and I will show you through exponential wealth growth how you and your family can be financially secure and you can be wealthy. I can't make it any more simpler than that. Let's change the path. Let's change this problem, this crisis. Stop looking at the government. They've been letting everybody down for 75 years. I'm convinced 75 years of failure is convincing enough to me. Let's change the course of the world. Thank you for being with us today.